keep my moon to me. Just go with me. Everybody wanna pay while I'm on the play. Everywhere that better want to pay. Better read that better be five to five fans for the rain. If my mouth is about cold again, if you're high with me, if you want to play, never he got power to rap. We can up this, come on, Cannalachia.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi, everyone. I guess that's the only part of wearing my headphones.
Yeah.
That's really helpful.
I was like, that sounded good. I have to get into that.
Why is everyone dancing? Hi, guys. Hi, JC.
Hey, Amanda.
How you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm really good, and I'm really excited. Our guest today, Leif Erickson.
Hello. This is extremely exciting. Nice to meet you.
I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah.
Writing professor, and lots of interesting stories, and we're going to get into that because I really appreciate your story as to like how you found cannabis.
Right.
And when you found cannabis more particularly.
Yeah.
But we're going to start our show off like we do every show. We're going to talk about some Canna news. Now in Canna news. I can't do it. My brain is busted. JC has informed me that Mercury is, what did Mercury do?
Yeah, Mercury's in retrograde.
Yeah.
Or as some folks like to say, something's in the, like, Gatorade's in the microwave or something like that.
Yeah, someone put my Gatorade in the microwave.
Yeah, could be that.
It could be that. Things are loose in my brain. That's all I know. But yeah, so I have an interesting story that I kind of dig. It's more of a sciencey story. I know lately we've been talking a lot of politics, but I have a little bit of science news. So a while back, some scientists found a plant in Thailand that while it didn't have any natural occurring THC, it did have naturally occurring CBD in the plant. But now even more important, Horton wants to be in on the show today.
She's getting all of our great photos.
But now even more importantly, a different scientist in Brazil found, it's a plant from the same family as the one found in Thailand, a different plant that actually pretty much I can't remember the name of it. It's got a very fancy science. If you Google Brazilian plant.
Well, what's great about that is as we expand this offering of information, we'll have links with our videos and our posts.
Yeah, there will be a link to this article about this particular plant. But essentially, it's a shrub. It's considered as a weed, no pun intended, in South America. It grows readily. And they have also found CBD in the fruits and flowers. So,
interesting.
Yeah, so that's exciting for a couple of reasons. So number one, obviously, unlike America and Canada, where we sort of are in this point where we now have 38 states with some sort of legalization and blah, blah, blah. South America is still very, very restrictive on cannabis, growing, selling, anything. But with a plant like this, which is just everywhere, it's a weed, essentially, but it could be a cheap and effective way to get CBD to the people.
That's very interesting. It'll be very interesting to see what comes of that.
Yeah. Curiouser and curiouser.
Yes.
And what it could mean here, too, for legislation, because here in Kentucky, I know that a lot of the CBD people, they're burning down hemp crops because it contains, 0.5% instead of 0.01.
And that's been a major issue.
Yeah.
A lot of farmers over the years have lost time and money. Time is money for many of them, obviously, and for many of us. But it's one of those things that, if it did surpass the testing and the THC was too high, that crop had to ultimately just be destroyed. And I, for one, as well as a few other folks, had thought, what a great thing, again, as we continue to, beat down and march with the choir of saying, hey, if we could just really come together and sit at the same table and have true cannabis legislation, that could have just continued to grow and maybe go into the medical marijuana industry and not waste it. Don't let the farmer go high and dry, and don't let the people go high and dry, for something that they need. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. I mean, I for one am all about plant medicine.
Yeah.
So,
And I'm curious to see, now that we know that the two plant, how many more plants are there where we just have naturally occurring CBD that, we don't know about, and how easily it could be to grow.
well, and at some point in the show, there's some people that I would like to have on to talk about terpenes and get in depth a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Because most all plants, have that. That's where they get their flavor and their taste and a lot of medicinal value, and protect themselves out in the wild. And that's another part of, the medicinal value of cannabis on top of the cannabinoids. So that's really exciting news.
Right?
Yeah.
I like it. I'm going to keep track of that, see where that goes.
Yeah, do. And we'll keep the listeners up to date with some links on the things we talk about too.
Yes,
So,
always.
because sometimes, when Gatorade's in the microwave or whatever that is, sometimes we forget, and so we want to
Things
make
get
certain that we give you the
lost.
right information. I had read an article that I found interesting about how, with the legislation or legalization of cannabis throughout the country, there was a study done. And I might have to post that link. I know it was I don't know if it was the University of Michigan, but it was out of Michigan. And they were looking at national data in states where cannabis had been legalized, that the fear was that the use by youth would increase, and that has not happened. It actually, if you look at the graph between 2019 and 2023, it actually looks like it dropped. So it's really interesting to see that a lot of the stuff that we saw people screaming about, if we legalize it, younger people and children, it'll get increased and they'll use it. But the data is coming in and it's showing that's not necessarily true.
And it's not, it shouldn't be surprising at all. When we look at, oh my Lord, the cat is back. Hi, cat. We tried. When you look at certain European countries, for instance, and we look at, alcohol use, right? And we know that in some places it's, in Germany, for instance, what is it called? But it's basically Kinder beer. And so it's like, 3% alcohol or whatever, not even 2.4%. You can get like a Radler. I don't know if you know, but so it's more of like an orange juice kind of vibe, but it's like a beer meets orange juice. At any rate, they call them Kinder beers essentially, and like a kid might have, one with dinner or something like that. When I say kid, I don't mean a toddler, but, or, a very small glass of, not a full glass of wine like an adult may have, but a small glass of wine at dinner. We see the rate of binge drinking in teenagers and young adults in Europe is far lower than it is in the U.S.
Well, and that when we look at that is such a big part of their culture too. And you're able to drink there before most of the time then you can drive. So you can legally drink before you can get your driver's license. So but I think that just goes back to. If you think about how, if you're raising your children or whatever someone is around, that doesn't mean that everything we experience in our youth, there can be a lot of traumas and stuff there. It doesn't make everything right, but a lot of our upbringing and responsibility of our actions shows. And I think in Europe, where the youth have been able to watch responsible use of alcohol, and in some places cannabis, they don't have those issues.
Yeah, it's when you make something less restrictive and less, secretive or whatever, you find less abuse of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, and it also allows, one of the arguments, and it's not really an argument, it's just the truth here in the U.S. when we talk about if we would reschedule marijuana, the research could really expand at all levels, and that's been a big issue here because there are so many medical professionals, and there's universities, which we've had one university here in the U.S. that's had kind of control of hemp kind of cannabis studies over the years, and but it's one of those things that that's a great thing. If you want to expand on it, it's got to be rescheduled, and that can just keeps getting kicked around from the federal level to the state level, and it's like, well, I can't do it until they do it, and if they don't do it, and well, here we are, we're still talking about it, you know. So, but yeah, I agree. That's very interesting though, because when I saw that headline, I was like, that was one of the things that most people were concerned about was, or the youth, is it going to increase the use of that, and is that going to be an issue? But apparently with the data that's coming in, that's just not true.
No. Because I mean, I don't know. I know your story is a little different, but like with most people that we've had on the show, as teens, if we want to drink, we're gonna find a way to drink. If
Yeah.
we want to smoke pot, we're gonna find a way to smoke.
Well, we
pot.
did.
And we did, and that's what I mean. Like,
Some of us did.
yeah, the law of you must be 21 or this is completely illegal did not stop us.
Well, I grew up with bootleggers, so it was. I grew up in that area. You drove out in the country, you knew somebody, and you were able to get it, of course. And then you knew someone at the store that wouldn't tell. So
Yes, I didn't have a fake ID. Did I steal it? No, she gave it to a family friend. Gave me her driver's license. And then, and she lived in another state, and so then she was like, here, just use mine, and I'll go get a new one. So I had because we looked very similar, and so I had a legitimate, at 14, I think, had a legit driver's license that said I was 22. I'm not going to name her name until my sister found it. My sister, who's 6 years older than me, was like, no, you stole this from her. And I was like, no, you gave it to me. Anyway. It was a whole thing between my sister and I and this family friend. But yeah, so I'm going to the liquor store at 14 with a legitimate driver's license that says I'm 22. Nobody's questioning me.
Well,
my point is we're very creative as teenagers, and we find ways to get the things we want,
we did that.
legal or not. Speaking of being a teenager. So, Leif, I wanted to talk to you because you have a varied, so almost all of our guests so far all have a story of, I was 13, I was 12, I was 15 when I, first got high.
Right.
But your first time using cannabis is a little different.
A little different. My teen years, I was a complete teetotaler of everything. So I come from a family that is just rife with addiction and all the problems that come associated with that. So I sort of grew up. It's weird to describe because I never felt like I cannot do it. I will not do it. It just wasn't. It wasn't on my radar.
Gotcha.
Like I never felt like I was missing out because I didn't want to. I didn't want to partake. I hung out with people who did. I wasn't like a real crusader about it or anything for anybody else, but it never was interesting to me. So I got 30-something years of life stone cold sober in every way, not a drink of alcohol except a sip one time in college because I didn't believe my friend had an alcoholic drink. And I said, no, I took a drink. And then I was just really disappointed in her. I was really that strict about it at the time.
Interesting.
Yeah, not now. I wish I had some whiskey right now. But so... Yeah, I didn't really even want any of it. And I was evangelical at the time. I'm sorry. I consider myself, as Alan Watts puts it, I consider myself a graduate of Christianity. No offense to anyone's faith, if whatever works for you. But for me, it was like a suit that I tried on in different ways over the years. It was always too big or too small. Never quite fit me. So, I wanted out of that life for many years before I was able to finally take the plunge. And then, not long after I had left my faith, and gleefully so, it's not a tragic story for me, it's a good one, then I developed a disorder called psoriatic arthritis, which is basically rheumatoid arthritis with skin like a Stephen King novel, is the, I think, the official diagnosis. So my body produces too much tumor necrosis factor, which is what kills bad cells.
Interesting.
So it causes me inflammation and other problems. So I was like, well, it's not going to hurt my testimony if somebody sees me smoking, because I never had a big problem with other people doing it. I thought it should be legal, even though I was in a conservative evangelical church. I used to get in trouble for things like that, saying things that they would be like, are you sure about that? Like I used to like about, gay people, and I wanted to love them. At the time, I thought the Bible commanded me to think it was wrong. I'm so glad I shed that silly thinking, but I thought I was supposed to think that. Right. And I'm pansexual myself, but I was not in touch with any of that at the time. So I wanted to just love people, and I would ask the church, can we have a ministry for gay people? And they would be like, you mean to convert them? And, well, Sure, but I'm talking about they have needs, they have problems in our society, and it was like, what are you talking about?
Right.
So it's things like cannabis. I never thought it should be illegal. It seemed silly to me, but that's the way it was. So that did stop me some, but also I wasn't interested. But even as an adult, when I got kind of interested, I still didn't do it for a while. But then once I was diagnosed with this disorder, and a good friend said, you know what's good for that? And I was like, I think it's time. I think it's time to give it a whirl. And I did, and I'm really happy that I did.
So you were in your
That's awesome.
30s.
I was 38.
Wow.
I'm 52 now.
Yeah. No, I mean, I love that. I love someone you discovered it purely from a medical standpoint
Right.
later in life.
I was
And
also interested because my curiosity is a mile deep. So-
of course. But I you may or may not have tried it.
Right.
Had given your given your diagnosis. What am I trying to say? But had you not been given your diagnosis,
Right.
you may not still have
Right.
not found a reason to try it, even beyond your curiosity.
a
for it.
beloved family member, I don't have her permission to say who it is, but
Fair.
had been a long time smoker, and she was like, "Hey, if you ever want to, come to me. I'll introduce you." And she was delighted.
I
When
love
I
it.
called her up.
She welcomed you with open arms, right?
She really did, and it was nice having her there because my first experience, I was like, first it was like this is not having any effect. Maybe I did it wrong, and then all of a sudden, I was like, oh, I feel like there's something on my chest, and she was able to go, it's okay. You've just ingested some cannabis.
Right.
You're fine. You're safe here. So it was a good experience.
I love that.
It's really interesting that you bring up your story. That really makes me think, and you're talking about I guess the term that I want to use is the conditioning in belief systems, and that was a big struggle for me growing up because I did grow up in a community with a lot of different churches and organizations that I was a part of, and I grew up with a somewhat religious family, and my grandparents raised me, and I kind of quit going to church when I was 16. I felt that it was a little hypocritical compared to the lessons of what I thought was Christ-like. And later on, I kind of missed a place of worship, so I ended up at the Episcopal Church because it was the first church that I went into and seen what seemingly was welcoming everyone at the time. And I think over time, and the deeper I get in that, when I think about cannabis, a lot of scholars have discussed over the years, being used as the holy anointing oil. Was it one of those things? And, when we look at those sort of things, regardless of what we're talking about, it bothers me that there are people suffering. And I know when I think back in the Buddhist teachings is that, suffering is inevitable, and it's how we live with that. I like to think about, the folks suffering, and they may not try this plant because of the conditioning of what they were taught was wrong. And, I see cannabis as an introspective substance. I think that when used properly, and when I mean properly, for some people that's just at home by themselves, and others they might need a friend. But I think that's where we can go in and find that place. And the one thing I can say that I took away from Christianity or the teachings of Christ was that the kingdom is within. And if we can't go within, it's not out. It's not the book. It's not a book. It's not a place. It's when we look another person in the eye and we try to find God there. And I think cannabis has played a role in my life like that. And for some, they might say that that's sacrilegious of me to say, but I think there's a big difference in what Christianity is and what Christ consciousness is, and living the life of what I believe that a master or an ascended master or Christ himself would have lived. And it's very different than what I think maybe we might have shared some similarities in our youth, because I can totally relate with some of the things you're saying, but it's interesting that you brought that up, and I hope you don't mind me kind of going into that, but I just feel like that's something that, listeners, there's, I think that's the biggest thing right now in our world is that, it's here or there, it's this person or that person or this person, but what we need to be able to do is, regardless of what our faith is or what we believe is, we need to be able to sit at the same table. We don't have to agree. We just have to love one another, and I think that's how we do it. And I think cannabis can play a role in that, honestly. And some people argue me on that one, but I have never met a group of people who sit around and share cannabis who are arguing. They have great discussion. You know?
I mean, I'm trying to think of like the last, maybe don't bogart that joint is probably like the biggest argument I've ever seen.
I think of it this way. It's like, it maybe for some people and a certain way of trying to order society doesn't want people to sit around and come to an understanding. I mean, when I first started considering, trying it, I was going to therapy. Everybody should go to therapy. I was at my therapist, and I said, I'm thinking about trying cannabis. I would like your advice. He was really open-minded, good therapist, and he said, let's think about it for a while. He liked to do that. He would pause and we would think, and then he said, I'm pretty sure he was a partaker himself, but he couldn't tell me that. He said, So he said, first of all, ethically, at the time, there was no medical, and he's like, ethically, you could get in trouble, just so you know that. There are penalties, et cetera. So I have to be upfront with you about that. And he said, the second thing is, there's a reason that sometimes people, like establishments and systems, don't want people to do these things. And if you decide to do it, just be aware that you're probably going to enter some headspace and some thinking that really is going to make certain portions of society uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So we're meant to be kept in a rat race of capitalistic rung climbing and backstabbing, and we got to get to the next level. We're not beautiful enough. We're not good enough. We're not smart enough. We're not young enough. And if you get people to view society through the open-mindedness that cannabis can often, provoke in a person, well, that just makes some people uncomfortable, I guess is what I'm trying to say in my long-winded way.
Well, and I agree with you 100%. I think we're at this time in our evolution that we've seen kind of like, we know that history can repeat itself, and we've seen the movements that happened in the 60s and 70s and things that are currently happening in our world that are not kind, that are separating our folks right here at home, because there's differences on both sides of this, when there are people from all walks and faiths that are suffering right now. And when I think about, that goes back to kind of the arguments, but when you say, there are some people who maybe don't want people sitting around doing that, because at that point in time, you have folks who are thinking differently. They are going inward. They're feeling things a little differently and seeing things from a little bit of a different perspective. And when people are doing that, it's really hard to condition them at that point. Mm-hmm. And so, I don't know. I think that the freeing of cannabis in 38 states in our country, I think that we're seeing that, and we live in the time that information is across the web instantaneously, that we've got people who are really thinking outside of the box and starting to question a lot of things that probably needed to be questioned decades ago.
Well, I'm already a questioner, and I was, like I said, back then I used to get in trouble for it, but the perspective shift that I experienced was real. Like, I think of music as an example, because you said perspective shift. That's the first thing I thought of is I play music. I play trumpet. I sing. I've been a musician since I was little. I'm not good enough to be professional, but I put a lot of soul and spirit into it, and I can play by ear, and I'm enthusiastic, and I can read music. So I love doing it. And then, of course, listening to music has always been a huge part of existence for me. So I remember specific experiences where I've heard this song that I love 100,000 times. And then once I started opening my mind through cannabis for medical reasons, it turned out I'm listening to music and it sounds different. I'm hearing things I never heard in the music before. I think it was Louis Armstrong saying something, I'm misquoting, and I might even have the wrong musician, but that it stopped time sort of for him when he was playing music and allowed him to stretch out in the seconds. I'm totally paraphrasing that, but that's the way I felt the quote when I read it. It was like, I understand that. There's this expansiveness in music that I hadn't experienced before. So I feel like in a lot of ways I got the best of both worlds. I got to experience everything with harsh reality. Just staring it dead in the face, which is the way I lived every day. I tried to numb it with religion. That was a different kind of drug, but I was like, there was no substances, and then also I get to experience it the other way. So I was happy then at the time. It didn't last. I needed out of it eventually, but I wasn't miserable most of that, and I'm happy now. I don't know how I get so lucky.
Well, go ahead.
No, I was just, as you guys were talking, my brain started to sort of wander a little bit and get to thinking, because you know me, not a big conspiracy theorist, but like you start piecing dots together and you start thinking about the 1940s, 1950s America when, well, especially the latter of the 1950s when we start to see desegregation, but and we see communist Russia in the 1940s, and we start to see changes and edits made to the Bible to specify certain things, to move away from one direction and another. We start to see televisions in every home, and we start to see this reefer madness. So it's again this sort of forming of society, because prior to that, for centuries we used cannabis.
Yeah, absolutely.
And pretty readily. The term hippies, by the way, I don't know if you know, this is one of my favorite little like weird factoids. The term hippie actually comes from, I want to say 1860s, 1870s. It was an Old West word for the people that would go into the brothels and or the bars or whatever, and instead of drinking, they would be smoking. And they would lie on their sides while they would, I can't move that far away, but they would lie on their sides or on their hips, and they would smoke instead of drink. And they were referred to as hippies. I found that out in a book about the Wild West.
Well, thanks for sharing that, because I had no idea. I
Right?
had no idea.
Yeah, I love those kind of things.
Yeah.
So we'd see usage of cannabis, and we were talking last week about the 6-foot tall high priestess with the golden eyeball that was found with a bag of weed. I love her. I want to be her friend. She's a few centuries too late. Right. But we see all these changes, and we see, I don't like the word indoctrination, but to a certain degree, it's when we start to see "In God We Trust" on our money, right? That didn't exist prior to 1947.
Somewhere around.
I don't know
there.
the exact date, but it is that.
Yeah,
right around in there.
It's right around in there. So we start to see this, the becomings of what now people believe to be a Christian nation, and so it's this. But we also had to change parts of the Bible in order to. So it's just fascinating to me, this, I don't know how I'm piecing all of this, but it's all about but the concept of free thinking in my head, that the way the government sort of wanted to go, like, no, we need nuclear families, and a lot of it was very much anti-communist, sort of propaganda, if you will, but yeah.
And I think over the ages and across the globe, I mean, if we go back far enough through history, we see that those books and they've been rewritten many times.
Yeah.
And I believe, now this is just my opinion, and we know what that's like, but I bet you that the folks who were sitting there thinking deeply about rewriting that book were probably using cannabis.
Probably.
Right.
They had to really think about it.
Which time? But no, so it's interesting to think about, how the government, the church, the whatever, whoever.
That rabbit hole goes deep.
It goes very deep, but wanting to all conform to this, drugs are bad, okay?
Okay.
Drugs and gay people are bad.
Okay.
It's not what I think.
Well, no, I don't think that. I don't think that either. And I think I think that was probably the hardest part for me. Looking back over the years when I thought about like Christianity, or at least what I was seeing as Christianity, a lot of the teachings, or it's not necessarily the teachings. It's how certain folks who are supposed to be leaders in the faith of Christianity kind of utilize those scriptures in ways that maybe isn't necessarily supposed to be used that way. I for one, I cannot believe that a religion or a faith that is based on the teachings of loving one another is to have someone stand and tell someone that they're not worthy enough.
Right.
I think that's wrong.
Yeah.
And I think, but I think that the majority of the Christians that I know, that I've met, that I've spoke to, would disagree with how, was it the Phelps? What are the,
Right.
out
Fred
of,
Phelps,
yeah, how they, have recreated,
Oh,
what do
you're
you-
talking about the folks, was that Missouri? Kansas?
It was,
wherever
West-
they're out of the people that go and picket soldiers' funerals.
Yeah.
Westboro Baptist Church.
Yes, we had a
Yes.
lot of that here in Kentucky actually over the years. They were here a few times.
Yeah, but I think that most Christians that I've ever spoken to would be like, no, they're taking the word and they're misconstruing it to what they think it should say. Cat.
Well, and I think we should also make a point, and what you're saying makes me think to say this is we should make the point that as we're speaking about this, that I don't believe that any three of us are like bashing Christianity at all.
At all.
But when we, there's good, I don't like to use the terms good and bad, but life is but a stage, right? And it can be like a chessboard, and there are positives and negatives in all things, and that can be a faith, that can be a community, it can be all kinds of things. But it's one of those things that there are people who have done a lot of bad things to other people that are of all different faiths or no faith at all, and we see that throughout the world. And I think that again is, outside of even Christianity, but just as I believe we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And I think the more that we can go inward and then look in another's eyes and try to see them for who they are, not their body, not their clothing, we really then understand what we are. And I think that's where love comes in. And I think that when I think about that, I think, what you're saying there, that most Christians and I think most Christians I know would say, yeah, that's not cool. That's not how we do it. That's not how we share the love of Christ. But we see this in all different kinds of religions and faiths where a select few go out of the way to do things that are not the majority, and that makes the whole thing look bad.
Interpretations, that's what I was looking at. That and how many different sects of Christianity that everybody can interpret a passage or a phrase differently,
And what if you're having some of that sweet cannabis in have it in a Sherlock Holmes pipe, and you sit back, and maybe if that's how you want to read your scripture, and you go there and go inward, but that doesn't mean you go out in the neighborhood when you have your aha moment and tell everyone else that's the same for them, right? But you might share your cannabis with them and say, now go home and read your book,
right?
Have your moment.
I know someone that the Church of Cannabis, which is out of Denver, which is a fun and interesting place to visit, but I actually know there is a church of Christian faith in Los Angeles, and part of their Sunday service is partaking in cannabis, and they've interpreted the Bible in certain ways where they say, I believe, I only know it from Jesus Christ Superstar, but when Mary Magdalene, when she's singing the oil for your head and feet.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, I thought maybe where you were going was maybe they did something like a Nicene or Apostles' Creed where they...
No, they've interpreted certain passages of, like when I think it was Mary Magdalene anointed Jesus before, after the Last Supper, right in there, that they said that was cannabis oil.
Well,
and so they on Sunday service they partake of cannabis with their parishioners, and it's a whole thing.
And I'd like to believe that it probably was, that it did have cannabis in it. And I think unless we were there, I mean, how do we know?
Right.
And but scholars have talked about over the years what is in the holy anointing oil, and if you look at it, a lot points to that. And if you go back to Judaism, you'll even see in the holier, the high temple, or going into the high of holies. Am I saying that correct? Holy of holies. Yeah. Sorry about that. But it's one of those things that there's stuff that I've read where cannabis was actually mixed with things like dung and frankincense and myrrh to actually make this beautiful incense that was lit in that area where the high priest went to be with, quote unquote, the Creator. Yeah. And I mean, that's something to think about. I mean, when I ponder on that, I think if it was good enough for the priests, if it was good enough for those who were leading the worship, then I believe it's good enough for all of the children. You know.
Yeah.
So.
I like that.
I do too.
So going beyond, so since you started partaking at 38, unlike most of us who at 14, 15, we're like, oh my God, we were so stupid. Do you have one of those, the highest you've ever been?
I've got a couple of those because it is interesting, starting that late in life that you go, I'm fully aware. And like I have a career, like I got to be up in the morning. There are certain factors. Not that cannabis that helps you not get up in the morning, but sometimes you like to have a drink with it too. And the next thing you know, you're like, I can't do that.
Yeah, no, I can't do that. And there are mornings even when I'll take it. If I try and take, I use edibles. That's my big thing. But I try and take them if I can sense that my insomnia is coming on. Like if my brain is just going, and I go, okay, this is going to keep me up tonight. But there's times where I think I'm going to be okay. I go to bed and it's not happening. And so I'll eat an edible at 2 a.m. when I look at the clock and go, oh my God, what am I doing? And then I wake up at 8 and I'm still high. Yeah. It's happened to me. So I have woken up in the morning still high from the night before.
So I'm curious to ask you were talking about psoriatic arthritis. Yeah. So for listeners who may be dealing with that, can you share with us how your cannabis use has helped you?
Absolutely. I want to tell one story.
I'm sorry. Totally.
I love questions, and I'll answer all of them. So I remember one time I was, there was one time where I was adjusting part of my body, and then I couldn't remember if I had done that or thought about it. So I kept doing it, and then I was like, that's getting uncomfortable. I need someone to help me realize if I have done this or need to do it. That was one. Another one was I was laying back listening to music. I'm sorry, lying back. I'm an English professor. People will write in like, it's just lying. I was lying back listening to music, and I saw an ant farm. I swear I did. I know it's a hallucination, but I saw an ant farm in the sky, but instead of ants going through the little hole tunnels, it was like neon yellow light that was in time with the music.
How?
The most fascinating thing. I loved it.
Yeah.
And I just lay there for a while just taking that in. That was quite enjoyable.
I dig that. I dig that.
So with me skipping that whole thing, maybe I need an edible right now for my ADHD there. I've totally skipped over that. So, but yeah, I was just curious. So when you're telling me you've seen that, I'm wondering what strain of cannabis you might
I don't know using. Because back then I didn't really know where to purchase it. Mm-hmm. And, so a couple times I got sources that were like, this is weird and not good. Or like one time I kept thinking I saw like a figure over here, like a dark figure. I was home alone and I would look over and it wasn't there, and I knew it wasn't there. That was bad, So I would sometimes come across things and I'm like, I don't know what I just did. So, but then I started relying on family members who knew how to find things, and then a good friend of mine was single and a really nice career, so he had a lot of expendable cash, and he used to get like real. When I was with him, I'd be like, I remember one time I was like, I need to sit still and listen to music for a while because I keep having to remind myself that it's okay. It's okay.
Gonna be all right.
But the question about the psoriatic arthritis. So basically, I have inflammation in my hands, especially, and shoulders and feet, and so it's like getting through the day sometimes, like, and my grip can just let go of things sometimes. So it's like that kind of thing. Like if I couldn't teach from home, which I am now because I have a doctor's note, because of the fatigue that comes with this. I was having to sleep on the floor of my office for, the concrete floor. So excuse me. So I'm able to, with COVID changed everything. So I'm able to teach at home full time and be really engaged with the students and go to faculty meetings like that and everything. But, so there are days where if I had to have a real job, I would be on disability, which is nothing wrong with that, but I want to keep teaching. And I'd rather not take a diminished check because I happen to have a disorder that I didn't ask for that's hereditary. So it's just a matter of dealing with the pain. So, I could take like naproxen. I have a prescription for that, but that stuff really hurts your body.
And after a long time, that can create ulcers and all kinds of things in the stomach. And I think it shows a great point here, because you're talking about how, here's a career that you really enjoy, and it's something that you can do and be able to use cannabis and function and do that. And I think here's a perfect example of why we need to expand the use of cannabis, specifically, for medical reasons, if not just completely legalize it at a national level, for the fact that we have other folks that may be in your situation, and they need that opportunity, to be able to do it. And I think that the Reefer Madness we just talked about, that was... I don't know, indoctrinated or whatever we want to say, but, we've created a way of thinking that I know is changing now, but there's still a lot of people who are hard set on, no, I don't think it's good for our society, but I beg to differ. I argue that, because, this is a prime example of that.
Well, I could take, like I said, naproxen. I could take that as much as I want. They give me scads of that stuff. I could take it every single day. I'm not supposed to take it more than once a day, but I could. It's right there. But I don't take it much because I have other things to help with pain. I take a shot in the thigh once a month of this bio drug you have to keep in the refrigerator, and that keeps the deformations at bay. But it doesn't do anything for the pain so much. It makes it roll back a bit because it's arresting the deformities, but it's not pain medication, So to me, the way I look at it is there's lots of things you can take for pain that you can get horribly addicted to, opioids and stuff. Yes, good people get addicted to those things. A lot of people miss that fact that you're in a certain amount of pain and you turn to something for solace, and next thing you know, you're dependent. There's no dependency to cannabis. So there's so many things you can take that are known to be harmful to humans, and yet we regulate those and we try to dole them out fairly to people who need them. It's only because of the historical fluke of the stigma attached to cannabis that it's viewed in a different way, and of course because, as my therapist said that time, that certain elements are uncomfortable with the expansion of the mind.
Yes,
there's that too, but also just, you all know, I don't have to tell you all the history of how it came to be such a stigma on cannabis,
and a stigma that is less than a century old. Mind you,
exactly.
Not that well, I don't know. I'd be interested to learn more about, like, Edwardian era Europeans, or during the French Revolution, was Marie Antoinette like in her room getting high? I know she didn't say let them eat cake, but I
would read that book, like historical figures. I know Carl Sagan said he had some of his best scientific ideas.
Yeah.
He used to smoke with Johnny Carson on the roof looking through the telescope.
Oh, yeah.
They would just converse.
But I know historically, they were using cocaine. We know that. We know snuff boxes and all this stuff. But you don't hear much about the history of cannabis. Was it just not prevalent, or is it just another one of those things that, they're hiding from us?
Well, I do have a few books on my shelf somewhere that go into some deep stories over the years of certain organizations and groups and the use of cannabis. So as we progress in this, maybe I'll need to pull a few chapters of those out, and we'll share that info.
Because I'm curious about that. The Middle Age. I bet Da Vinci was smoking some blunts.
Well, and there were drinks with red wine and cannabis that was mixed and used for different types of, believe it or not, religious things and things over the years. But it would be interesting to know that during those major historical moments, as we progress to the Western world, what was going on with cannabis more, What were the folks doing?
I'm reading a book about Tycho Brahe now. Have you all heard of Tycho Brahe? He's the father of astronomy. He was Kepler's tutor.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so, but he was a wild man. He got part of his nose cut off in a drunken duel with a good friend, and he fashioned like an alloy nose out of copper.
Wow.
This was in the 1600s.
Yeah.
Wow.
He had an elk that that loved to drink beer, and he would have these long parties and have the elk drink all this beer to entertain his guests. And it fell down the stairs and died sadly, and he was heartbroken. But he died allegedly because he wouldn't leave a party, even though his bladder was full and his bladder ruptured. And they don't know for sure that that's how he died. But, somebody like him, he was all the time trying to experience life in as big a way as he could. And also at the same time, very introspective and wise. So, I would wonder, is he partaking of some cannabis wine or maybe a smokable substance ahead? Then I want to see if there's any of that in the book. I've just started.
And that makes me...
As I think about it, we certainly see, again, not that far back in history, Lewis Carroll wasn't, but, we'd see the caterpillar smoking the hookah.
Yeah.
And I don't even think about that until literally right now while we're having this discussion. Wait, this is in our children's books. Yeah. So was it just really that prevalent that we don't even...
It's kind of like the Amanita
that they didn't
mushroom.
even talk about
I mean, we grew up from Nintendo to the Smurfs to... I mean, this Amanita mushroom was also always there.
But
we didn't...
the Cheshire cat and the caterpillar, one side will make you grow larger, the other make you grow smaller.
Right.
Well, and you talking about him thinking and that sort of the way he must think, and to think esoterically, but to think about astronomy and thinking about how his mind must have expanded out, but then he was going in and back out. Like that was where my mind's going as you're talking about this. Is I'm thinking about wonder how deeply he must have thought on some cannabis, maybe.
Right. Well, he was a child of privilege, and he used all of his money for scientific exploration when he wasn't having parties. He was having scientific exploration. That's how he was a patron for a lot of up and coming brilliant scientists like Kepler. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah. Now I'm thinking about the ancient Greeks when they would all gather around the square and argue about philosophy. They had to have all just been getting high.
Yes.
That's the argument, right? We're going back to when people sit around and get high. What do they argue about? Philosophy.
Exactly.
So where did
high? That's a good theory. You should write this book.
Right.
So and let's call it higher education.
Whoa.
I like it.
No.
So now, do you and Heather, we've talked about, eat everything from eating mushrooms. Do you have a preferred method? Do you prefer smoking? Do you edibles? Do you?
So edibles are more of helping with the body, which is what I'm after,
Yeah.
So, but I prefer to smoke. Really.
Fair enough.
The flower.
But do you have a favorite recipe though, as far as edibles, or do you just buy?
No, because
pre-made?
I can't cook anything. I mean, I can follow a recipe, but I know baking is very exact, and I don't have much subtlety or exactitude about me. I tend to stay away from that sort of thing.
Enough.
So usually, it's if someone else has something, then I'm like, I'll just partake of that.
Fair enough.
My only paranoia story really comes from edibles. When I was at my ex-in-laws years ago, and I was needing to, as an escape from those in-laws, I was like, there's no smoking around here because they would not be okay. So I was like, edibles, and I just went too far. And that's one of those times where I was at Kroger and thought the cops were out to get me. I thought they were laying a dragnet, And my wife at the time was later she was like, I thought you were acting weird. When I told her all this, she goes, I thought you were acting weird. I said, you didn't know what was going on in my head. I was like, that's the only experience I've had like that. And it's funny now, but at the time I backed my car in the driveway. It was like, they won't see my license plate.
Yeah, edibles, they can do that to you.
They can.
Yeah. I think on
watch your dosage.
I don't know if it's episode 1 or 2 we talk about dosage, but yeah, I had a friend who we had some brownies and I didn't have that much either. And by the time I got ready to leave, I thought she was mad at me. I don't know why I was saying it to you, but it was like, but yeah, I felt you when you were saying you were at Kroger and you thought cops, everybody.
Right. One of my favorite viral meme, whatever you want to call it, was back in the day, if you've ever heard it. It's the cop and his wife who he took the weed out of lockup or whatever it is, the evidence room, and they made brownies, and so then he calls 911 because he thinks that they're dead.
It's precious.
It's one of my
that so
favorite
much.
things ever. It's like, no, you don't understand. We're already dead.
We're dead. we ate some stuff and we're dead now.
Time has stopped, and we're all dead. It's the best ever.
Yes.
Oh, so where are we?
Oh my.
We've
It's that ADHD again.
It is.
I've had the brain zoomies all day. I get it.
Well, we always ask after that. Do you think cannabis? Do you feel it should be legal medically and recreationally? I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I mean, it's like we regulate things. I think it's you were talking about the news earlier about we y'all got in the conversation of this prohibition idea. Like, it's only kind of a modern, silly idea that the only way to keep people from hurting themselves is harsh regulation. It's law, it's regulation. And then did we not learn anything from prohibition of alcohol? Like, it's like we didn't seem to have. But
I agree.
This is a very new, not in the good way. Not that all ancient ideas are good. That's a logical fallacy. But on the other hand, like, people existed a long time with cannabis use that didn't really cause that much of a wave in society, really. Maybe positively with creativity and things like that. But you just don't hear of somebody going on a rampage after smoking a joint. It's like, it's unheard of for violence to come out of just, cannabis. So we existed a long time as a species without worrying about it, and then all of a sudden Nixon's like, "Well, you got to," So of course we know that administration targeted certain aspects of society with those laws. So, and here you got people who just take it as a given. Well, it's always been bad. It's always been evil. No, it's just been shaped that way for an agenda, and because of some historical flukes. And so I absolutely think it should be. I think all. Yes, I don't think it's a drug, but even if you want to categorize it as a drug, I think all drugs should be a medical issue and not a legal issue.
Yeah, and as you're saying that, I was replaying some historical moments that have been caught on film or written about, and you mentioned Nixon, but even going back to where people were yelling at the hippies or whatever, it was like then it went from the substance to the artist or whoever was using it, and you mentioned Da Vinci, and you're talking about art and that sort of thing, but a lot of the things that have shaped us, the art, you talking about Greek, talking about hierarchy, the things that have shaped us over the years could very well have stemmed from those who used cannabis. And I remember growing up, and I had friends and we partook of cannabis, or we would smoke cannabis here and there, but I over the years have consumed cannabis with people who were professors, who were people that were deep thinkers, who were folks who were making change. And never once did any of these folks make me think, well, this is just a horrible substance. Right. We're having these great ideas, and that could affect change positively or creating something new. And I think it goes back to what you're saying, like. For whatever the agenda or whatever it might be, that we've painted that picture for so long, and that's starting to change now. But I think the more that we expand on these discussions with one another and have folks on who get to share their story, that's what excites me about doing this, is hearing your story and hearing other people's story, and then the listeners hearing those stories, and people at home being able to go, I relate to that. I get that. Or maybe the person who has psoriatic arthritis, that they hear your story and go, you know what? I think I'm going to give that a try. Yeah. And that changes their life. To me, that's important work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree.
Just putting that in there.
Absolutely.
So
I want to talk. Yeah, I want to talk about your writing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I always love to talk about writing. I'm an English professor.
Right?
I've got a million projects going at any given time, and I'm obsessed with all of them. So
So how did your writing journey begin?
Oh, wow. I have been writing and wanting to be a writer since I was, I guess, 12. It's the first time I remember thinking, I could just write this story. I had some ideas. I just have constantly things going on in my head. I'm not medicated for ADD, and I should be. I've been diagnosed. I probably should be. But part of me likes the rats running around in there So they're always chasing something. And so I don't know. I'm still trying to decide what to do about that. But so I've heard that some people can't see visuals when they imagine, and they don't.
Yeah, I just heard that
I
the
don't
first time.
understand that. Like, I'll tell you something weird about me. Like, when I meditate, I go through different phases, and I don't know where it comes from, where I just pay attention to what my brain wants to focus on. I don't do any traditional thing. And lately, it's been just a visual of me removing my eyes and lifting up a bunch of hedges and just watching things. And I don't know what that means. But that's the kind of how are you with profanity? I don't want to.
Oh, you're
okay. That's the kind of shit that's always going on in my brain.
Yeah.
So when I was 12, I was like, I can write these things down. So, it's on one hand, you don't want to admit you've been writing since you're 12. Then people are like, where are your collection of books and your Pulitzer Prize? At this point, you think you'd be good at it by now, right?
I feel that because I in my head somewhere in my place of the many I'm a screenwriter. I have never actually, well, that's not entirely true. I've filmed one short film and a couple pilots of TV shows, but I've never like gone big and tried to like pitch a project to a major studio but I have like a good 24 scripts.
Yeah.
That are just sitting on my computer in some various state of completely finished to this is an idea that I have.
Well, there's this misconception. I think it's a misconception, especially in academia, that to be a writer, you have to put a capital W on that, and you have to do X, Y, and Z, and you have to be successful in such a way, and this and that. And the fact is, when I started writing at 12, I wasn't thinking of any of that. I had a story to tell, and I wanted to write it down. Now, it was atrociously bad, but I was 12. Like, it was like so.
That's great.
As I was telling you the other day on the phone, like, so what happened is I remember specifically being just bothered, just running into this wall constantly of, I love writing, I want to keep writing, but I don't feel like I'm saying what I want to say. I don't feel like I'm dialing it in me. One of my favorite books is Damien by Hermann Hesse. And it's I don't read German, so there's different translations of the line. But all I wanted to do was to live according to the instincts of my higher self. Why did I find that so difficult? And that's what I felt like, that my writing was always just short of what I want to say, what I want to get across, who I am. It didn't even feel like me. And I think that's because of all the cauldron of the childhood trauma, from in my case, religious abuse, the wanting to make it real, my faith, but not feeling like it was, and that thing that does in your brain where you're trying to do something sincerely, but you also feel like a failure and a hypocrite because you're not doing it right. You don't feel like it's doing any. All of that was just in my head all the time, and in addition to coming out of religion in general and being diagnosed with this disorder, a lot of things happened to me between like 35 and 45. It was a big 10 years there. Big stuff. Most of it positive. But what happened is, since I have begun to say that I need to be healthy and I need to be true to who I am and do no harm, and like seek out what it is that I am and who it is that I am, regardless of where the chips may fall. Again, without doing harm, psychopaths are not allowed to adopt this philosophy. But if I'm true to that and pursuing that, I can love people better, I can have better relationships, and whoa, I'm a better writer. Like, all of a sudden, I'm writing things, post 35, 40, that feel meaningful to me in a much more real way, that feel like they come from who I actually am, that are in my actual voice. And one of the biggest compliments I ever got was from a friend who said, "You write like a 90-year-old man." And he meant that like this life experience. He said, the way you write now, God, this is turning into me bragging about my writing. It's not what I intended at all, because it's so subjective. So I don't know what a good writer is. I know what I like. And I know what I consider to be like good formal writing, because I teach that. But when it comes to creative writing, I don't know if it's good or not. What I know is it comes from the place that I wanted it to come from in my youth.
I don't know that anybody can, I'm not out buying Twilight books, but she sold how many millions of copies?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's all subjective to the audience.
Yeah. I remember when I was in getting my MFA degree in creative nonfiction, we had these 10-day residencies we had to do. It was through Murray State University. Most of it was through the mail with a mentor, but we did these 10 days residencies. And it was a great program. I really liked it. But I remember that we would have these seminars on publishing and stuff like that. So one side of their mouth, they were telling us all the time, write for love, write because you feel it, write because you're a writer, let's talk about the deep philosophy of writing. And then we'd have a seminar where these published writers would come in and say, well, here's how you get into the publishing game. And you all are just, and it's like this entire focus on that one aspect.
It's a formula, and
doing it a certain way. Yeah, exactly.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So as you're talking about, we're talking about being subjective, and you're talking about how when you write, how that you're at that place where it's coming from you, it's coming from that space. Would you say that writing for you then is like a type of self-care, self-love?
Absolutely.
In a way?
Yeah, so I have to give myself some self-forgiveness when I'm in a semester because I feel like I'm not writing enough. I've got all these ideas, and all I can do is go write notes down. I'm just too busy with papers. English professor, right? So grading papers constantly, and I give a lot of feedback to my students. So what I had to come to realize is I am writing during those times. I'm just writing with a very specific audience, and to allow that to be okay. and so my creative output kind of fluctuates between semesters, and so I come to a place where I don't even remember what your question was now. I apologize.
No, it's completely
it's
fine.
A hazard of knowing me.
I may do that in a moment myself, but when you're saying that you're writing it from that place internally, I wanted to know, is that kind of like self-care? Is that a way of self-love?
Absolutely. It certainly is, because I lose myself in it to the point where I honestly don't even care if it's, quote, good at that point. It feels good to me, but I'm not projecting out to the point where it has to be something in the world yet.
Well, I feel like every piece of art that I've ever experienced that's moved me, whether that be music or something someone has written, it came from that place. It didn't come from the idea that I'm going to write or compose or do this for the world. It just came. It came from them, and it was when it was shared, and then folks were like, they're like, wow. Or I'm speaking for myself. Those that move me have always been the ones that I know. It's the in-depthness. It's the part that comes from that spiritual place of who we are. It's, I guess, as people would put it, it was raw. It was real. It was a story. But I think that's some of the greatest work that's ever been done came from that space that was of love,
I write creative nonfiction. Well, that's what my MFA is in. And one of the things that happened to me in that same stretch of life there was that I switched from fiction to nonfiction in my MFA. And that's a whole other long story, but basically I had these revelations about some things. My grandfather, and he was a horrible person, but seemed great on the outside. And I just started writing about him one day, and then my mentor was like, you have to switch to nonfiction. I did, but now I write, in my leisure time, I find myself writing fiction these days. It's so funny. Like fabulous fiction, like magic realism, strange little stories. I love the short form. Although I have, this sci-fi series of novels I've got mapped out, and it's a whole thing.
I love that. Yeah, everybody is always, because my family's backstory is fascinating. Going, my grandpa, like I could literally write like dozens of movies just about my family. My grandpa was a rum runner during the Prohibition. My grandma was a candy striper, lived in Queens, and journaled every single day of her life from the time she was 8 years old until just a few weeks before she passed away.
Wow.
Yeah, it's fascinating, but. Yeah, dozens of stuff, but I drift towards sort of the paranormal horror. Like that's
fun.
What I'm into.
I like to write plays a lot too. I just love writing plays, especially like one-act plays. I have a series of plays I'm trying to collect into a book that I'm still working on. I've got ideas for some, and I've got some written. It's called This Kind of Happened. So it's based on historical, real thing, like interactions between real people in history, but I fictionalize them.
Oh, fun.
So I have one about where John Adams and Ben Franklin are traveling to stave off the Revolutionary War to go negotiate with somebody. and they had to sleep in the same hotel room in the same bed, which was more common back then. But they were such different characters, and they argued over whether or not to keep the window open because John Adams said, "We'll catch our death of cold," and Ben Franklin lectured him instead of letting him sleep on his theory of colds, which was that's not what causes sickness. It turns out he was right, by the way. So I took that little nugget, and then I just built this, which I love this place so much. It's going to be staged somewhere. So far, nobody has taken the bait because Ben Franklin is so wordy that even though it's a one-act play,
Right.
it's a lot. I would want to play the role, actually, but I'm probably too tired to do
Seems
it.
fitting. No, it's I love that. I love taking. Have you ever read Steve Martin's Picasso at the Lapin Agile?
I'm familiar with it, but I haven't read it.
Yeah,
no.
yeah,
Yeah.
The same idea of taking a
good,
nonfiction,
Yeah.
Historical figure and
Right.
placing them in a fictional element and
Yeah.
having a conversation with someone at a bar.
I've got these two guys in a basement during the War of the Worlds broadcast, which I had to fictionalize because of copyright, but you can mention it, but I couldn't have any, so I made up dialogue from it that they would
Yeah.
hear on the radio. And they're in this basement seeking shelter, and one guy goes upstairs, and the other one hears that it's a show. And he takes this opportunity to profess his love to the other guy. When he comes downstairs, he said, "We should do it because the end of the world is nigh."
That's so good. I
It
love
ends with
that.
an accidental suicide murder
Oh, no.
at the end. It seems like everything I write in stage ends up with death involved, but it's a comedy. So I don't know why that is exactly.
So our timer did go off, but we're not going to edit this part.
Okay.
So we are going to edit this part of the conversation, but I think we're going to have like 2 more questions.
Okay.
Does that work for everybody?
I'm long-winded. I apologize.
Does that work? Okay.
Oh no, this is
When
not the
that
first
alarm
time.
goes off, suddenly I'm like,
I didn't mean to have
we have to close everything down now. All right. And I didn't want to interrupt you. So on that concept of historical figures and in fictional circumstances, if you could have any 3 historical figures over for dinner, who would they be?
You asked me that, and I intentionally didn't think of it because I wanted to do it on the spot.
I love it.
So I knew the first one was Van Morrison. Now let me say, having said that, I'm very frustrated with him as a person these days. I won't go into all the reasons, but old white man syndrome, basically. So I'm frustrated with him. But, oh, my God, his music just changed my life. So I used to dream of going to dinner with him, or he was at dinner, and I would see him in this dream, and I would say, "Can I eat dinner with you? I won't even talk to you." And then I would just sit there and eat with him. That was the entire dream. So when I was I was needing out of evangelicalism so badly. I was teaching. My first job was at a Baptist school, and I needed out. Fundamentalist. Nothing lets you know if you want to be a fundamentalist by teaching 4 years among them. I was like, I have to get out. So I was driving an hour and a half to get my master's degree. To EKU, and I couldn't do that now. I also had a baby that I had asked for. My ex didn't want a baby. We had a baby thanks to her saying yes, and I was raising this baby basically by myself because I wanted to, and I was working full-time job, and I was driving an hour and a half to class, and I went in. This was long before I ever partook of cannabis, but I had experiences on those drives. Where I had that kind of cosmic consciousness, and I was still trying to make Christianity work, but his music, when I would just listen over and over that drive, I started not hallucinating. I was driving, but it was close, to it. So Van Morrison, long way of saying
Dig
that. You said 3 from history.
History, celebrities, historical figures,
Or somebody I knew. Is that okay?
Somebody
he's
you
dead.
knew.
So my great friend Henry Walters, who I would love to talk to about cannabis use, because I don't know what he would say, because he was such a brilliant, wise man. But at this Baptist school, he taught me to think. He took me and my friends out in the woods, and on these hikes, he would teach us to question everything. If they had known, they would have fired him long before they did, which they eventually fired him for, loving the students too much, not in the bad way, but in the good way.
What are you trying to say there?
Just to be clear about that.
Yikes.
But loving them as Jesus would love them, it turns out that wasn't too popular. So, but anyway, he taught me to think, and he was a Baptist minister for 30 years, and when he was on his deathbed, he couldn't talk to me, but I told him I was leaving Christianity, and I wanted to hear what he would say. I would love to have a conversation with him. He was always challenging my thinking. in some way. So definitely Henry Walters. And as far as the third, we got to put some sort of wild card in there, gosh, maybe, God, that's a tough one. Maybe Hermann Hesse. I started reading Hesse and I was like nervous because I like this guy, but then I was like mid-century, German. Oh no! Flip.
Go
Oh, anti-Nazi! Yay! Anti-Nazi helped artists escape.
Right?
Yay! All right. So probably Hermann.
There were a few free thinkers.
Or Carl Jung, who inspired Hesse. Some of this idea of individuation of the subconscious and the conscious that I'm very interested in. So probably a luminary in that field of some sort.
I dig that. And then you've already said you're not a big cook. Is that
no? I mean, I'm okay if I need to cook for myself, but
fairness? So we're not cooking for them, I'm guessing. So where are you taking them out to eat? What kind of food are we going to?
Oh wow! Well, if I'm going to have dinner with these guys, I'm going to be decadent. I mean, I'm a hedonist. That was one of my problems with Christianity. Is this hedonist was always there, like let me out. So food was the one way, and food was the one forbidden sin that you were allowed and even encouraged to partake in the Baptist church, at least. You're like, you eat up. So I did, and I got in that habit. So today I'm like, if I'm going to be with these guys, it's going to have to be something delicious, like some decadent Italian food or Cajun food, like something that we could just pile it up and maybe in the middle of the table and everybody partake and we just get messy and drink too much and talk about whatever comes up.
I love it. So is it a medicated dinner then?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I would have to talk Henry into it probably. I was so flabbergasted when I found out that he wanted me to do his eulogy. He knew so many people over the years and he had told me that once, but I thought he's probably told 50 people that. And his daughters said Henry wanted. I was just floored, and I go, and it's this little Baptist church with everybody in polyester. I say that because it was so strange to have someone like that to open your mind the way he did, and caused me to question my Christianity long before I was ready to leave it. But his philosophy was, if you're not going to be all in and really believe it, then why bother? And he wanted to poke at those places so you could be honest with yourself about them. So I don't know if I could get him to partake.
I think I would have liked to have met Henry.
You would like to have met him. And, I don't mean to lionize. Everybody's got their faults. And, I could name his, of course. They weren't huge, but everybody's got them. But, man, he was like such an influence. And just like, I don't know. I feel like he opened my mind at a right time in life where I really, really needed it. He planted some seeds that really didn't grow fully until much later. I wasn't ready, but he never pushed me to think anything or be any way. His thing was just constantly seek, constantly question, constantly hold everyone accountable. He got in trouble by having us sit in chapel services instead of singing stand up for Jesus. He had us sing sit down for Jesus, and while we sat. And it was like they did not like that. He eventually got fired because students who got expelled, you weren't supposed to take them in. The faculty lived on campus. It's a boarding school. And so the students would come to his house hungry or like they don't have anywhere to go. Some of these kids were from messed up families,
Yeah.
But the school was like, out, because you smoke cannabis or something.
That seems like a very loving thing to do.
He would take them in. And that they eventually were like, well, we have to let you go because you're not allowed to do that.
Right.
Yeah, he and his wife that's just the way they were. Their daughters said that growing up, the kids at school accused them of lying because there's no way your home life is that happy. Henry just wanted everybody to be happy and healthy and to not take anybody else's word for anything. And he was anti-authoritarian, and all of that at a fundamentalist Baptist school.
But it's going back to, so I'm going to say my view as far as Christianity goes, and it doesn't fully encompass, I'm very weary of organized religion, right? Yeah. That's my thing. But when I do read the Bible and I do read the teachings of Jesus, I'm like, I want to sit and hear that man's. Everything he says is beautiful and makes sense, and it's fantastic.
And who did he get angry at? Is the people who mixed religion and money and power, to oppress other people.
Yeah,
that's who he took the whip after.
I've said it,
and flipped a few tables.
Flipped a few tables, whipped a few people. I'm like, I'm down with this guy. I've had this conversation where I'm like, if Jesus was resurrected today, I feel like he'd be down in Skid Row.
Oh, absolutely.
Talking to the people that, need him, that need love and faith and community and togetherness.
That's who he had dinner with, was the people, the scourges of society, the tax collectors and the prostitutes at the time, that were considered, those were two of the lowest people you could be.
And hanging out with lepers, right?
Yeah.
That was Jesus, right?
And that was a thing when I was younger, when I kind of took my little hiatus and was like, I feel like this is a little hypocritical. And it was because I was starting to question those things. I was like, why are we drinking out of these expensive cups and these fine linens, and there's people hungry?
Yeah.
Is that what Jesus would have done? I mean, I was just like, come on, folks.
One of my favorite sort of movie little instances is probably Indiana Jones and, is it Raiders of the Lost Ark? Where they go into
this crystal skull?
No,
okay.
It's where they go into Petra and Jordan, but they go in and they find the Holy Grail.
Oh yeah, the third one.
And and the Nazis are like, this must be it. It's gold and embellished, and they all die, and then Indy is like, no, dude, it's the wooden one. He was a carpenter,
right?
And I love that, and I'm like, like that makes way more sense than this. Of course, then there's the whole theory about Mary Magdalene and all that, which I love. If you've never read The Royals and the Blue Bloods, it's do you have any reference of what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
I haven't read the books, but I know there's a lot of the theories.
The theory that Mary Magdalene was the Holy Grail,
right.
Yep.
There's
a lot of that. This could go on for hours if we really got into that topic.
Yeah.
But
it is fun. I will say that knowing scriptures better than a lot of organized religious people I know. Some of the stuff people put in their papers in my classes that they think is in the Bible, I'm like, oh my, you really have never actually read your founding document, have you? Come on.
Yeah. No, I grew in my religious growing up, which there wasn't a lot, but as far as from my parents go, because they both experienced religious trauma growing up. So, they both have Christian faith. There wasn't organized religion, wasn't part of my life. But my godparents were Jewish, and I went to temple on occasion. One of my mom's best friends is one of the interpreters for the Dalai Lama, and so we went and saw him speak when he got his doctorate at Columbia. I've been to Catholic church and Baptist church. It was just kind of an open world, and then I studied a little bit in high school, so it's kind of been like open look at the whole world. I had friends that were Muslim and taught me about the Quran, and so that's kind of I've taken bits of information from all of these different world religions and gone, oh, that's interesting. I like that.
Well, I think there's many paths to the same location, and Ram Dass always taught we were just walking each other home.
Right.
Yeah.
We really
it's as the more you study you see all of the interconnectedness of without when you dismantle the organization of this is how it must be, and you just start to look at the whole of humanity looking for an answer. Really, that's what it all is. It's all why. And all of humanity asking that question and having different, why are we here and what happens next?
Yeah.
And that's all it is. And so,
we just unfortunately are in a time when that is utilized, I think, in a way to create turmoil. And there's a lot of people suffering over that. And, I said something earlier today in a post to a friend online, and it was kind of in depth on spirituality and some religion. And I had put in there, what if we are, I believe we're spiritual beings having a human experience, like I say over and over. But what if we are supposed to create, quote unquote, heaven on earth? What if we were to do that? What if time halted and the dis-ease or the disease, as we say, that's among us goes away because we found that in love? What if that's it, that the source that's in us all, that connects us all, if we were able to hone it and bring it together, what if that is ultimately the true goal, but we have to be able to sit at the same table,
There was a video I watched recently where the man poses, what if God was water?
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about, and that's great.
I loved it so much.
Do you know what that is?
I don't, but I'm thinking of some things as you say it.
That means he's always in us, around us. You know, at all times, he is in the air, the streams. He is the life force that feeds all plants, all living things.
Right. Well, you know, the story of I think of the story of the Good Samaritan, like people think that's just a story about being nice to people in general. But if you all know that story, it's like this was someone interacting with someone they were supposed to consider unclean and terrible in society. Not only just helping a random person, but this was going out of your way to help someone who you're supposed to not like, that is different from you, that is from a different clan or a different race or a different family, and that you're supposed to keep separate. You're supposed to shun them, but Jesus was all about throw yourself in. Throw yourself in. Now that's a different message, you know. It's quite a trick. The people you were talking about that speak the loudest, and they get the bad rap for the Christians who mean well, but the ones who speak the loudest seem to have replaced the religion with something that bears his name but has nothing to do with his teachings, and that's a pretty neat trick if you think about it.
Yeah.
It's a scary one.
It is.
It is.
It's pretty pernicious.
I agree.
So on that, I think we have one final question for you.
All right.
And my guess is that it's probably going to come from Henry. But what is one of your favorite, what is the greatest piece of advice as a human, as a writer, as a weed smoker, that you've ever been given that you want to share?
Just in general?
In general.
Oh,
your
my.
favorite piece of advice.
I say I probably should have looked at the questions closer ahead of time, but again, I did it on purpose because it's just like when I go to my therapist. If I plan what I'm going to talk about, nothing happens. But if I just go in there and start talking,
I like this is a great therapy session for all of us every week.
So the greatest advice I'm trying to think if I want to be funny or serious about this. Okay, so I mean I guess it would be Henry. I'm going to tell his daughters to watch this episode for sure because we all just miss him terribly. But I think he would say it would be a package of advice. Okay, it would be love everyone. I'm going to get choked up. Dang it. So when he was dying, I saw his Bible and I looked through it. And he had verses highlighted and underlined and notes in the margins, and every single one was about loving people, about being kind. And that's huge. And while you're doing it, question everything. Because when people get hurt, lives get trampled, when we allow people to do things which was going on all around us at the time, which was this fundamentalist authoritarian idea of what people should be like and how you should conduct yourself, but it's diseased and it's poison, in my opinion. Okay, this is my experience, and he, I don't know, I think he saw himself as being placed in that environment to have an opposite effect, and it worked. So question everything while being kind. It reminds me of my great Aunt Martha, also an amazing individual from a shit family. I'm sorry, Bob, if you watch this, but she knows. I love my mom; she's awesome. But she escaped all that. But my Aunt Martha just in this family of terrible people, honestly. And she was so kind. And when she was dying at 99 years old and 6 months, they said, "Aunt Martha, you've read the Bible countless times. What's the most important thing?" And she said, "Love everyone, no exceptions."
I love that.
There you go.
I love that.
I agree with Martha.
Yeah.
That's very Jesus-like.
It's very, and it's funny because again, when we look at all religions, so a big part of paganism or Celtic, whatever you want to call that sort of, Wiccan, do what thou willst, harm none.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I live by that. Really.
Yeah. I think it's important.
It's considered selfish by a lot of people in the bad way, but I just don't think it is. Like I said earlier, you can't love people properly if you're just denying your essential nature. Again, no psychopaths allowed. People always act like that's a good argument against that philosophy. I'm like, well, that's, of course, we're trying to have a society here. But
yeah.
We should help them too instead of just relying on punishment, but that's a whole other discussion.
Right. But harm none is a big part of,
Yeah.
Psychopaths sort of miss that harm none aspect. But
Which is another type of loving, is to not harm. You know? So.
Yeah.
Sure.
But yeah, before we go,
Yes.
I'd like to send you home with a little gift from our company, Ancient Aromas.
Oh, wow.
So there's a chill canner roller. So if you have any little aches and pains,
I
you can
do
put
all
that
the time.
on. And then there's some lip balm in there. lip assist, and because you play the trumpet, so it'd be good for your lips. And then I put you a little bit of beard conditioner in there as well.
Oh, great.
They all have some hemp extract in it. Good stuff
right.
for you. And I have a little something else here for you, too, that's not in that bag that I think would be beneficial for what you deal with. And we'll talk about that after the show.
Fair enough.
And so and we'll let everyone, it's a topical product, but we'll let everyone out there just think about what it might be. But it's been really nice to meet you and you sharing your story. I hope that I know that your story has touched me. I can understand and relate to some of the things that you've experienced. And I hope that the people who are listening, I hope there's people out there that relate or that can relate with that, as well as see themselves and maybe be able to experience cannabis in a way that might be able to help any of their conditions. So thank you for sharing those stories. Thank you so much.
And are you on, before we go, are you any social media, website where people can
absolutely.
read?
I should do the self-promotions.
Yeah.
Well, I started doing a lot of TikToks for my classes because I teach online, and my wife was like, you have to do TikTok. And I was like, I'm too old. And she's a marketing genius. She runs her own business, very successful business, and so she knows what she's talking about. I finally did it. What were you going to say?
So when I was trying to research and find out a little bit more about what you do daily, regular, and I found, and I think I said to Chill, I think he's a real professor, but I'm not sure if he just has a completely unhinged TikTok and he's calling himself the professor.
That's awesome.
I don't know what's happening.
I'll take that. I said that to my wife because you said that to me on the phone, and I told her, she said, you should totally take that as a compliment. You realize that, don't you?
Absolutely. No, because I was like, either he's found a genius way to like get his students' attention, and they're going to pay attention and, because it's so wild, or he's just out of his mind. And I'm not sure which is which, but they're both fantastic.
Like, why not Zoidberg? Why not both?
Yeah.
I do. So the TikTok is it's prof.leif.erickson. That's my TikTok, and if I get to 1,000 followers, from what I understand, I can do live, and I want to do live lectures again. I miss it.
Oh, very cool.
So I could do live to my students and whoever wants to watch.
Okay, so go follow Professor.
I'm up to like 230 followers. I need 1,000, from what I understand, to do live.
We can do that. Let's do that. I'll add you as soon as we get off, and then
when we share this, we'll share obviously your TikTok channel. And
honestly, it's been a great experience. It's been very gratifying. I've been blown away by like one of my videos called How to Write an Evaluation Paper, which, come on, how boring can that title be? Has over 7,000 views and hundreds of likes, and people favorited it and said, I'm using this in my class that aren't my students. So that's one social media.
My one little piece of social media tidbit for you. Hashtag book talk. If you don't know, hashtag book talk.
Okay.
That's where you'll start getting into the authors and ferocious readers and writers, and
so some of my humanities stuff, especially, I could share, kind of get in that circulation.
Yeah, but if you start, so book talk,
we talk about a lot of writers.
There's all these sort of subcultures that exist within TikTok, and you can start getting into those. Yeah.
Well, and also I have LeifEricksonWrites.com.
Cool.
Is my writing blog, but it's so hopelessly, I need to update it. The writing's all there that I've put on there, but all my stuff is like I'm hoarding away on my computer, and my colleagues are like, why are you not putting this stuff out there? Why are you not sending off for publication? I'm like, I don't know, I just want to write. So I'm trying to, I want to update it more, but there's plenty of writing on there. So that, my Facebook account is public. That's Leif Erickson. I like being public and saying all these Jesus-y things that are anti-authoritarianism, and just saying, if you don't like it, deal with it. It's public. Leif Erickson is my page.
I dig it. All right. So go follow Leif Erickson, Professor Leif Erickson, all the good stuff. Thank you again so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
We so appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right. And with that, Chill, take us out.
Go with me. Come on, Cannalachia.
Nice.
Wee.